Hey guys, welcome to my channel. We are reading Little Women by Louisa M Alcott. So we are actually on the final last chapter, and that's chapter 23. This is going to be a longer chapter, just letting you guys know. So, yeah, here we go. Chapter 23. Aunt March settles the question. Like bees swarming after their queen, mother and daughters hovered about Mr. March the next day, neglecting everything to look at, wait upon, and listen to the new invalid as he sat propped up in the big chair by Beth's sofa, with the other three close by, and Hannah popping her head now and then to peek at the dear man. Nothing seemed needed to complete their happiness, but something was needed, and the elder ones felt it. Though none confessed the fact, Mr. and Mrs. March looked at one another with an anxious expression. As their eyes followed Meg, Jo had sudden fit of cerebrity, and was seen to shake her fist at Mr. Brooks' umbrella, which had been left in the hall. Meg was absent-minded, started when the bell rang, and colored when John's name was mentioned. Laurie went by in the afternoon, and seeing Meg as at the window, seemed suddenly possessed with the melodramatic fit, for he fell down upon one knee in the snow, beat his breast, tore his hair, and clasped his hands inwardly. And when Meg told him to behave himself and go away, he wrung imaginary tears out of his handkerchief, and staggered around the corner as if in utter despair. "What does the goose mean?" said Meg. He's showing you how your John will go on by and by. Touching, isn't it? Answered Jo scornfully. Don't say my John. It isn't proper or true. But Meg's voice lingered over the words as if they sounded pleasant to her. Please don't plague me, Jo. I've told you I don't care much about him, and there isn't to be anything said, but we are all to be friendly and go on as before. We can't, for something has been said, and Laurie's mischief has spoiled you for me. I see it, and so does Mother. You are not like your own self a bit, and seemed ever so far away from me. I don't mean to plague you. I will bear it like a man. But I do wish it was all settled. I hate to wait, so if you mean ever to do it, make haste and have it over quick, said Jo peevishly. I can't say or do anything till he speaks, and he won't, because Father said I was too young, began Meg. If he did speak, you wouldn't know what to say, but would cry or blush, or let him have his own way, instead of giving a good decided no. I'm not so silly and weak as you think. I know just what I should say, for I've planned it all. There's no knowing what may happen, and I wish to be prepared. Would you mind telling me what you'd say? Asked Jo, more respectfully. Oh, I should, merrily said, quite calming and decidedly. Thank you, Mr. Brooke. You are very kind, but I agree with Father, and I am too young to enter into any engagement at present, so please say no more, but let us be friends as we were. I don't believe you'll ever say it, and I don't know he won't be satisfied if you do. If he goes on like the rejected lovers in books, you'll give in, rather than hurt his feelings. No, I won't. I shall tell him I've made up my mind, and shall walk out of the room with dignity." Meg rose as she spoke, and was just going to rehearse the dignified exit, when a step in the hall made her fly into her seat and began to sew as if her life depended on finishing the particular scene in a given time. Joe smothered a laugh at the sudden change, and when someone gave a modest tap, opened the door with a grim aspect. "Good afternoon. I came to get my umbrella, and is to see how your father finds himself today," said Mr. Brooke, getting the trifle confused. "It's very well. He's in the rack. I'll get him, and tell it you were here." I have jumbled her father and the umbrella well together, in her reply. Joe slipped out of the room to give Meg a chance to make her speech. The air her dignity, but the instant she vanished, Meg began to settle towards the door, murmuring, "Mother will like to see you. Pray sit down. I'll call her." "Don't go. Are you afraid of me, Margaret?" said Mr. Brooke, looked so hurt that Meg thought she might have done something very rude. She blushed up a little curls on her forehead, for he had never called her Margaret before. Anxious to appear friendly at her ease, she put out her hand with a confiding gesture and said gratefully, "How can I be afraid when you have been so kind to father? I only wish I could thank you for it." "Shall I tell you how?" asked Mr. Brooke, holding the small hand fast in both his big ones, and looking down at Meg with so much love in his brown eyes, and that her heart began to flutter. "Oh, no, please don't. I'd rather not," she said, trying to withdraw her hand, and looked frightened. "I won't trouble you. I only want to know if you care for me a little, Meg. I love you so much, dear," added Mr. Brooke tenderly. This was the moment for the calm, proper speech, but Meg didn't make it. She forgot every word of it, hung her head, and answered, "I don't know," so softly that John had to stomp down and catch the foolish little reply. He seemed to think it was worth the trouble, for he smiled to himself, as if quite satisfied, pressed the plump hand gracefully, and said in his most mischievous tone, Will you try to find out? I want to know so much, for I can't go to work with any heart until I learn whether I am to have my reward in the end or not." "I'm too young," flattered Meg. "I'll wait. In the meantime, you could be learning to like me. Would it be a very hard lesson, dear?" "Not if I choose to learn it, but please choose to learn it, Meg. I love to teach, and this is easier than German," broke in John, getting possession of the other hand so that she had no time to hiding her face. His tone was properly beseeching, but stealing a shy look at him, Meg saw that his eyes were merry as well as tender, and that he wore the satisfied smile of one who had no doubt of his success. This nettled her. Annie Moffat's foolish lessons in contrary came into her mind, and the love of power which sleeps in blossoms of the best of the little woman woke up all of a sudden and took possession of her. She felt excited and strange, and not knowing what else to do, followed the capricious impulse, and withdrawing her hands, said peremptorily, "I don't choose. Please go away and let me be." Poor Mr. Brooke looked as if his lovely castle in the air was tumbling about his ears, for he had never seen Meg in such a mood before. It rather bewildered him. "Do you really mean that?" he asked, anxiously following her as she walked away. "Yes, I do. I don't want to be worried about such things. Father says I needeth it's too soon, and I'd rather not. Mayn't I hope you change your mind by and by. I'll wait and say nothing till you have had more time. Don't play with me, Meg. I don't think that of you. Don't think of me at all. I'd rather you wouldn't say Meg, taking the naughty satisfaction in her trying her lover's patience and her own power." He was gravel and pale now, and looked decidedly more on the novel heroes whom she admired, but she neither slapped his forehead nor tramped over the room. As they did, he just stood looking at her so wistfully, so tenderly, that she found her heart relenting in spite of herself. What would have happened next, I couldn't say. If Aunt March had not come hobbling in, the old lady couldn't resist her longing to see her nephew. For she had met Laurie as she took her airing, and hearing of Mr. March's arrival, drove straight out to see him. The family were all busy in the back part of the house, and that she had made her way quietly, and hoping to surprise them. She did surprise two of them so much that Meg started as if she had seen a ghost, and Mr. Brooke vanished into the study. "Bless me, what's all this?" cried the old lady, with the rap of her cane, as she glanced from the pale young gentleman to the scarlet young lady. "It's father's friend. I'm so surprised to see you," simmered Meg. "That's event," returned Aunt March, sitting down. "But what is father's friend saying to make you look like a pinion?" "There is mischief going on, and I insist upon knowing what it is." "We were merely talking. Mr. Brooke came for his umbrella," began Meg. "Brooke, that's boy's tutor." "Ah, I understand now." Joe blundered into the wrong message in one of your Pa's letters. "I made her tell me. You haven't gone to accept him, child," cried Aunt March. "Hush, he'll hear." "Shan't I call Mother?" said Meg, much troubled. "Not yet. I've something to say to you, and I must free my mind at once. Tell me, do you mean to marry this cook? If you do not, no penny, 1 penny of my money ever goes to you. Remember that. And be sensible, girl," said the old lady. Now Aunt March possessed in perfection of the art of rousing in the spirit of obsession in the gentlest people. If Aunt March had begged Meg to accept John Brooke, she would probably have declared she couldn't think of it. But as she was ordered not to like him, she immediately made up her mind that she would, in inclination as well as perseverity, made the decision easy. And being already much excited, Meg opposed the old lady with unusual spirit. "I shall marry whom I please, Aunt March, and you can leave your money to anyone you like." "Highty-tighty, is that the way you take your advice, miss? You'll be sorry for it by and by, when you've tried love in cottage and found it a failure." "It can't be a worse one than some people find in big houses," retorted Meg. Aunt March put on her glasses and took a look at the girl, for she did not know her in the new mood. Meg hardly knew herself, as she felt so brave and independent, so glad to defend John and assert her right to love him. If she liked Aunt March, saw that she had begun wrong, and after a little pause, made a fresh start, saying as mildly as she could, "Now, Meg, my dear, so reasonable, and take my advice. You ought to marry well and help your family. It's your duty to make a rich match. Father and mother don't think so. They like John, though he is poor." "Your pa and me, my dear, have no more worldly wisdom than two babies." "I'm glad of it," cried Meg, southily. Aunt March took no notice, but went on with her lecture. "This rook is poor and hasn't got any rich relation, has he?" "No, but he has many warm friends. You can't live on friends. Try it and see how cool they'll grow." "He hasn't any business, has he?" "Not yet. Mr. Lawrence is going to help him." "That won't last long. Jamie Lawrence is a crochet old fellow, and not to be depended on. So you intend to marry a man without money, position, or business, and go on working harder than you do now, when you might be comfortable all your days by minding me and going better. I thought you had more sense, Meg." "I couldn't do better if I waited half my life. John is good and wise. He got heaps of talent. He's willing to work and sure to get on. He's so energetic and brave. Everyone likes and respects him. And I'm proud to think he cares for me, though. I'm so poor and young and silly," said Meg, looking prettier than ever in her earnestness. "He knows you have got rich relation, child. That's a secret of his liking, I suspect." "Aunt March, how dare you say such a thing? John is above such meanness, and I won't listen to you a minute if you talk so," cried Meg indignantly, forgetting everything but the injustice of the old lady's suspicions. "My John wouldn't marry for money any more than I would. We are willing to work, and we mean to wait. I'm not afraid of being poor, for I've been happy so far, and I know I shall be with him because he loves me, and I—" Meg stopped there, remembering all of a sudden that she had not made up her mind, that she had told her John to go away, and that he might be overhearing her inconsistent remarks. Aunt March was very angry, for she had set her heart on having her pretty niece make a fine match, and something in the girl's happy young face made the lonely old woman feel sad and sour. "Well, I wash my hands in the whole affair. You are a willful child, and you've lost more than you know by this piece of folly. No, I won't stop. I disappointed you in you, and haven't spirits to see your pa now. Don't expect anything from me when you are married. Your Mr. Brooks' friends must take care of you. I'm done with you forever." And slamming the door to Meg's face, Aunt March drove off a high dudgeon. She seemed to take all the girl's courage with her, for when left alone, Meg stood a moment, undecided whether to laugh or cry. Before she could make up her mind, she was taken possession of by Mr. Brooke, who said all of one breath, "I couldn't help hearing, Meg. Thank you for defending me, and Aunt March for proving that you do care for me a little bit. I didn't know how much till she abused you," began Meg. "And I needn't go away, but may stay to be happy, may I, dear?" Here was another fine chance to make the crushing speech and stainly exit, but Meg never thought of doing either the disgrace herself in Joe's eyes forever by meekly whispering, "Yes, John," and hiding her face on Mr. Brooks' wasteful coat. Alright, we do got 4 more pages. 15 minutes after Aunt March's departure, Joe came softly downstairs, paused in an instant a parlor door, and hearing no sound within, nodded and smiled with a satisfied expression, saying to herself she has sent him away as we planned, and that affair and settle, I'll go here and fun, and have a good laugh over it. But poor Joe never got her laugh, for she was transfixed upon the 3 holds by this spectacle, which held her there, staring, with her mouth nearly as open as her eyes. Going in and exclude over the fallen enemy, and to praise the strong-minded sister for the banishment of the objectionable lover. And certain was a shock of beholding aforesaid enemy scenerly sitting on the sofa with the strong-minded sister, enthroned upon his knee, and wearing an expression of the most abject submission. Joe gave a sort of gasp, as if the cold, unexpected turning to the tables actually took her breath away. At the old sound, the lovers turned and saw her. Meg jumped up, looking both proud and shy, but that man, as Joe called, actually laughed and said coolly, as he kissed an astonished newcomer, "Sister Joe, congratulate us." That was adding insult to injury. It was altogether too much to make some wild demonstration with her hands. Joe vanished without a word, rushing upstairs and startled and invaded by the explaining tragically as she bursted into the room. "Oh, do somebody go down quick. John Brooke is acting dreadful, and Meg likes it." Mr. and Mrs. March left the room with speed, and casting herself upon the bed, Joe cried and scoldingly, tempestuously, as she told the awful news to Beth and Amy. The little girls, however, considered it to be the most agreeable and interesting event, and Joe got a little comfort from them. So she went up to her refuge in the garret and confided her troubles to the rats. Nobody ever knew what went on in the parlor that afternoon, but a great deal of talking was done, and quite Mr. Brooke astonished his friends by the eloquence and spirit with which he pleaded his suit, told his plans, and pursued them to arrange everything just as he wanted it. The tea bell rang before he had finished describing the paradise which he meant to earn for Meg, and he proudly took her in the supper, both looking so happy, and Joe hadn't the heart to be jealous of dismal. "You can't say nothing pleasant ever happened now, can you, Meg?" said Amy, trying to decide how she would group the lovers in the sketch she was planning to take. "No, I'm sure I can't. How much has happened since I said that?" "It seems a year ago," answered Meg. "The joy came close up to the sorrows this time, and I rather think the changes have begun," said Miss March. "In most families there comes now and then a year full of events. This has been such a one, but it ends well after all." "Hope the next will end better," muttered Joe, who found it very hard to see Meg absorbed in a stranger before her face, for Joe loved a few persons very dearly, and dreaded to have their affection lost or lessened in any way. "I hope the 3rd year from this will end better. It shall, if I live and work out my plans," said Mr. Brooke, smiling at Meg. If as if everything has become possible to him now. Doesn't it seem very long to wait? Asked Amy, who was in a hurry for the wedding. I've got so much to learn before I shall be ready. It seems a short time for me, answered Meg, with the sweet gravity of her face never seen there before. You have only to wait. I am to do the work, said John, beginning his labors by picking up Meg's napkin with an expression which caused Jo to shake her head and then say to herself with the air of relief in the front door banged, "Here comes Laurie. Now we shall have a little sentimental conversation." But Jo was mistaken, for Laurie came prancing in, overflowing with spirits, hearing the great bridal-looking bouquet for Miss John Brooke, the eventually laboring under the delusion that the whole affair had been brought about by his excellent management. I knew Brooke would have it all to his own. He always does. For when he makes up his mind to accomplish anything, it's done, though. The sky falls, and Laurie, when he had presented his offering to the congratulations for obligated for that recommendation, I take it as a good omen for the future. To invite you with my wedding on the spot, answered Mr. Brooke, who felt the peace with all mankind, even his mischievous pupil. I'll come if I'm at the ends of the earth, for the sight of Jo's face alone on that occasion would be worth a long journey. You don't look festive, madam. What's the matter? Asked Laurie, following her into the corner of the parlor. Witheringly, all the adjourned to greet Mr. Lawrence. I don't approve to be the match, but I've made up my mind to bear with it, and shall not say a word against it, said Jo. Suddenly, you can't know how hard it is for me to give up Meg, she continued, with a little quiver in her voice. You don't give her up. You only go halves, said Laurie, consolingly. It can never be the same again. I've lost my dearest friend, sighed Jo. You've got me anyhow. I'm not good for much, I know, but I'll stand by you, Jo, all the days of my life. Upon my word I will. And Laurie meant what she said. I know you will, and I'm ever so much obligated. You are always been a great comfort to me, Teddy, returned Jo gratefully, shaking hands. Well, now, don't dismal. There's a good fellow. It's all right. You see, Meg is happy. Brooke will fly round and get settled immediately. Grandpa will attend to him, and it will be very jolly to see Meg in her own little house. We'll have capital times after she is gone, for I shall be through college before long, and then we'll go aboard or some nice trip or other. Wouldn't that console you? I rather think it would, but there's no knowing what may happen in 3 years, said Jo thoughtfully. That's true. Don't you wish you could take a look forward to see where we shall all be then? I do, returned Laurie. I think not, for I might see something sad, and everyone looks so happy now. I don't believe they could be much improved. And Jo's eyes went slowly round the room, brightening as they looked for the prospect as the pleasant one. Father and mother sat together quietly, reliving the first chapter of the romance, which for them began some 20 years ago. Amy was drawing the lovers who sat apart in the beautiful world of their own, the light of which touched their face with a grace of little could not copy. Beth lie on her sofa talking cheerily with her old friend, who held her little hand as if she felt that it possessed the power to lead him along the peaceful way she walked. Jo lounged in her favorite low seat with a grave, quiet look which best became her, and Laurie, leaning on the back of her chair, his chin on the level with her curly head, smiled with his friendless aspect and nodding at her in the long glass which reflected them both. So grouped, the curtains fall upon Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy. Whether it ever rises again depends upon the reception given to the first act of the domestic drama called Little Women. The end. Thank you for listening, guys. I will see you guys in the next book.